There is a Purva Mimamsa, there is a Uttara Mimamsa. Between them, there is a conjoining called the Sankarsha Kanda, which is also called Devata Kanda, which gives you a nice continuity between the karma and the philosophy. This the Sankarsha Kanda deals more with the Devata, the nature of the Devata, the Chandas and things like that. So the concrete and the abstract are related, or how the action and the principle are related. This is the best. Now these two are always united, Shiva and Shakti. They are the two complementary principles that are running the world in. Now you get down to Shaiva Shakta, you have this they are interpreted in various ways. They are called Prakasha and Vimarsha, the enlightenment and the discrimination. Vimarsha is also, Vimarsha is a word for mirror. Basically, it's like he's seeing himself in that mirror. So his image of himself in her is the world, basically. So Asuras are not immortal for the same reason, because Devatas are eternal. They go by Dharma. They uphold Dharma and they help people who abide by Dharma.
Namaste everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session, this episode of my conversations with my friend, and if I may say, a little bit of mentor as well in all topics of related to the Indian civilization. Today's topic is Devatas, is to find out and learn more about who the Devas and Devis are. This has been, Shankar has earlier done a talk on Murti Puja, a topic which is very close to him. But I wanted to, maybe with all my naivety, all by my little understanding, not complete understanding of Devatas. I've been firstly born and brought up in North India with a very heavy Punjabi Arya Samaji influence, if you like. And so that's the context of a large part of North India, not only Punjab or me or all of that. We know very little about Murti Puja. But if you go to my mother's temple, for example, you will find Guru Nanak to Sri Rama, Krishna, Ganapati, Lakshmi, a whole pantheon of Devas, Devis in her big temple. But finally, of course, when one is praying, there is this innate knowing it's all one. When it's all one, then how do the Devatas fit in that? Why do we do temple worship? This thought has helped me learn and understand a lot about Murti Puja over the last few years, this search. And this is my personal journey of continuing on that path and understanding more. And in this process, I'm hoping that all the audience will also learn more. As always, please leave your comments once you go through the session and questions so that we can bring it up in following sessions. I can bring it up with Shankar in the following sessions. Thank you, Shankarji, for being here. So what I've done here is that I've put together not a comprehensive idea of what my current understanding is of the nature of the ideas of God as they are constructed in my mind, and they are conflicting, sometimes paradoxical also. But I've just made a bulleted list of all the things. I'm going to first go through all of them. Hopefully the audience will relate to some of these points as well, some of the confusion around this as well. And then maybe we can kick off the conversation from anywhere you like in this.
Sure.
So what I understand and what I do not, like I said, I've just put them all out here and in just one series of points. So I understand that the concept of Brahman, which is an Upanishadic concept, if I understand correctly, and that there is simple consciousness and energy. Now, as I understand, it is energy which arose from consciousness. In the beginning, there is only Sat Chit Anand, which is Shiva. Some people call that Shiva. Other times I've heard that Shiva and Shakti are actually the Purush and Prakriti. I am not sure if Purush should be taken as consciousness, or consciousness is Para Brahma or Brahman, and then that gives rise to Shiva and Shakti, the Purush and Prakriti, and from them emerge all the other the pantheon of Devas and Devatas, Devis and Devatas of their own with their own attributes. So that confusion remains a little bit. Then there is a book in my personal experience many years ago, 15-18 years ago. This book came in my life, Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. Some may judge me as having a very Christian orientation, if you like. However, to Advaita, if you like. But that book actually really opened me up to some very terrific ways of looking at the idea of God. The book actually helped me break down the fears that one has developed as a young boy, which one tends to carry. Fear of punishment, for example, of being sent to hell and heaven, and all of these ideas that, as kids we do form them. And like I said, I don't know so much about South India on how you are brought up, for example. But this idea of paap chadega and nark mein jayega, all of this is common in at least North India, and which I felt now, having learned a lot about Abrahamic and Dharmic religions, I feel that this is an impression of 1,000 years of Abrahamism, which a lot of North Indians at least may have adopted. Having said that, coming back to the book, just everything is oneness in a very question-answer format, right? Exactly the type of conversation sort of I'm doing with you and with other people in my conversation. So it's a very powerful way of communicating messages. I found this very powerful. And like I said, being a Hindu, these ideas of oneness came very easily to me, that everything is one. There is no difference between creator and created. In fact, there is not really a creator God idea in the book Conversations with God. It's actually a very, as far as I understand, Advaitic or very modern science, quantum physics aspect of the idea of God. That, for example, there is no time that is not there right now. It's all there. You're simply experiencing different moments of it in different potentially parallel universes. So it's more like that, right? It's like that, but it talks about some very deep issues of life and kills this whole idea of hell and and heaven. It just brushes it away, shoves it away. So I found the book actually rooted in Hinduism, to be honest. It may be written by an American, originally Christian, but it's a very heavily rooted in Hinduism book in my worldview. I learned about a very nice idea in the book about replacing this word God with the word life. And after that, this I've tried to teach to a lot of people, including my son and many other people in my circle of influence. So I'll be a little vulnerable here, but when I sort of need help, there's some trouble or whatever, I actually, or even without trouble, basically, other than my own temple and looking at Shiva, I actually see the same. I actually would stand with folded hands in the night sky and send out a little prayer for help or whatever, right? And I see that as Mother or Shiva or Brahman. I don't really create a difference in my mind. And I don't know if that is good, bad, whatever. And I would do that the same thing in Goa while looking at the Arabian Sea, for example. Yeah, when I do a little bit Achaman before I step into the sea, I mean, that's the relationship I have come to build with what the idea of God. So and it's easy for a Hindu and actually any pagans. I read a very interesting research paper which said that all pagans are able to live with ambiguity far better than any Christians, for example. So I found that so true, because even though there are paradoxical ideas, and whether Shiva is the Brahman or is the male principle, you don't have clear answers, but you're still okay going to a Shivalinga and offering jal and praying. So that ambiguity exists, but it's okay. So I'm just calling all of these things out to set up a context, or at least where I am. Brahma Kumaris, very interestingly, and I ended up arguing with some of the Devis over there in Mount Abu some years back, where they say it's Andakar. Shiva is Andakar, and the Shiva, the person with form, is Shankar actually, and so which also Sadhguru also says, but he uses the term Shiva interchangeably sometimes, so it leads to some confusion in my mind. However, that Andakar idea actually is potentially the Brahman, the Brahmand. Now, does that Shiva, that Brahmand is what they are referring to as Shiva? Not sure. And again, the Shivalinga, when we go to the Shivalinga, the Linga and Yoni, it seems more closer to the Purush and the Prakriti principle, which is a very beautiful iconography, if you like, of the reminding of divinity. And so this is the other question. Is a Shivalinga only iconography, or is there more to the Shivalinga? I have actually tried to ask this question to several people, sometimes got spanked for asking that question, because it's supposed to have that answer. Of course, in Muslim forums or wherever you go, you basically, they would tend to use abusive language for very sexual slur, actually, to talk about Hindus worshipping to a Shivalinga. It's very common in Muslim groups. If you just scrape the surface of goodness, it's all there. Then, as I understand, from the principle of Shiva-Shakti emerged the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and the myriad lower forms, if I may say, of the Devatas. As part of that, coming specifically to Devi, and why? Because yes, other than Shiva, just the whole idea of mother nature, or the seeing life as Prakriti or as mother comes equally easily, right? So if I go to a Kamakshi temple, which is my favorite temple in Delhi, which is I think a attached temple to the Kanchipuram Kamakshi Mandir, very, very powerful place. I go into very, very nice, intense meditation whenever I sit there. So I am never sure of, to me, when I look at the Devi or worship her, I see that Murti and see in that Murti the entire creation as well. I don't know if that's how it needs to be, because I've also learned recently that that you can't go to a Saraswati and ask for strength and valor and fame. You have to ask Saraswati for knowledge and arts, right? So in that sense, deities have a specific purpose. They have attributes. They can only give you something that they are designed to give you, or are possible, and it's only possible to ask them what they can. They are limited in that sense. They have only limited qualities, attributes. And so a Saraswati might you can't go to you can maybe go to Kali and ask for fame and valor and power, like for example Shivaji Maharaj with Bhavani, Tulja Bhavani, if I'm not wrong. So I've learned all of these ideas, and I'm trying to integrate all of them in my mind. That is where I am, basically. I also have tended to learn that the Devas, especially with Anand Prasad, that Devas and Devis are probably beyond human perception, but they are beyond sense perception. and they are real beings, sentient beings, who are probably in another dimension, and we have access to them through mantra, yantra, tantra, or perhaps even bhakti of a very high level of devotion, as Sri Ramakrishna had for Devi Kali. The other important thing I've understood is that the Devatas do not care whether you worship them, whether you believe in them or no. The Abrahamic idea, Allah or the Christian God, actually asks for being worshipped. Otherwise, if you do not worship, then there is punishment and throwing into hell and all of that business. The Devatas are not in need of being worshipped. Whether you do or not do, it's your problem. You won't get the benefits if you do not go to a Saraswati asking for knowledge or arts, or go to a Kali for having access to something else or other things. So basically, the center of us worshipping Devatas or doing a puja to Devatas is about your own well-being, is how I've come to understand it. And and last but not the least, inspired by your writings in either in Hindupedia or somewhere, Anand Venkataraman, who's been an early speaker with us some years ago, actually talked about this lecture in which he's saying that Devas and Devis are possibly not beings, and he refers to Dr. Subhash Kak's book. If you give me a minute, I do want to, for our audience, play that video, and we'll embed it here as part of that before we go on to this is my last point. And he says that the mantras are basically to invigorate or activate your own cognitive processes in your own brain, which possibly give you access to the qualities of that Devata. So this is the gamut, Shankar, for all that I know as of now, including all the confusions which I've laid out. I just want to play that video, and then we'll go on to your conversations, if you're okay.
Creating an app or something. I think for me, from a kind of intellectual kind of baat-cheet kind of standpoint, is whether this will help in standard people's understanding of Indian thought, whether it will help in reinterpreting that. Like, I know philosophically there are many different interpretations, but standard people, I think, still have a very concrete understanding of what whatever a deity is or something. So for example, I read this, at least I read a summary of this book by the great Subhash Kak called The Gods Within. It was written several decades ago. It says Mind, Consciousness and the Vedic Tradition, where he basically kind of made the point that maybe all these deities are essentially representations of cognitive processes rather than actual objects or something out there. So for example, like, we think of Saraswati. Is Saraswati like somebody who's there kind of flying in the sky, whom you pray to and she'll kind of bless you? Or is Saraswati like a metaphor for the neural mechanisms which make learning possible, make memory possible? We know like there are many specific networks which improve learning and memory distributed throughout the brain. Could it be that Saraswati is essentially the subjective perception of these structures going about their processing, which would mean that if you do Saraswati sadhana, maybe you're somehow activating or improving connections in these structures. And there are some hints which I think suggest that this interpretation probably might be true. Okay, so one is that like a lot of times you see this kind of statement that the deity is the mantra, like the deity has a mantra and they said the mantra is the deity. And then this Shankara Bharadwaj Khandavalli, whom I had mentioned earlier, he actually wrote this very interesting kind of description on one of his articles. So he says the mantra syllables will determine whether the deity is fierce or benign. So, like especially in the Shakta deities, like some of them are like Ugra, some of them are like very kind of like very pleasant, right? So I just took out this little paragraph from his work. The qualities of a Devta can be seen from the Bijas of the Devta. Each Matrika Bija's quality can be seen in the attributes of Dhyana Sloka. For instance, Bhuvaneshwari was like one of the Shakti forms, is one of the most pleasant forms. This is because Bhuvaneshwari Bija has Maya Bija, which apparently is Khreem, and Maya Bija corresponds to Anandmay Kosh. So he says she is bound to be a personification of bliss because her Bija has Maya Bija. So it's a very interesting kind of a reverse engineering of what the deity is. Like, I think a standard understanding would be that there is a deity and then you create a mantra about it or something as a worship or something. But here he's saying that the mantra creates the deity.
Very, very interesting. The mantra creates the the deity. I'm going to pause this. Yeah. Mantra creates the deity. Please, over to you, Shankar, now. Help enlighten me.
Yeah, so we can probably start with your first slide. So as a worldview, there is Devata, everybody refers to that word, and then there is a Brahman is most aptly translated probably as absolute. That's the word that Sri Aurobindo also uses. It is basically the unmanifest in its original form, what the essence of the world is. And then we have countless devatas, but the interesting and important thing is Ramanujacharya says this: the word Deva applies Paramatma Paryantam. So basically, you start with whatever divine beings, the illuminated beings are there from the world of the mind, illuminated mind. From there to the ultimate, to the Parabrahma or whatever, to all the layers, the word Deva applies. Which means it's not about individuals or persons that you are referring to. It can mean anything. It can mean the Devata personifications also. It can also mean the most abstract and subtle concept. It doesn't have to be either this or that. Now, the other thing is once we go to Upanishads and see what they are contemplating and speculating about the Brahman. And what we hear about Devatas. They're very close. Basically, whatever descriptions we see about the Devatas in the Upakhyanas, the Lalita Upakhyanā, for instance, it's not different from the Upanishadic description. So basically, you describe a lot of attributes about it. But ultimately,
actually, in Upanishads, Shankar, too, I mean, I used to read Radhakrishnan's 10 Principal Upanishads. Read not the whole book, but I've never been a good reader, but in bits and pieces. And read the Mandukya Upanishad some time ago. Small, very small, few translations, very, very powerful. It was all simply about states of, I don't know what to say, awakeness, awareness or sleepfulness or whatever, Turiya, and no idea of God, nothing. It is just simply, I don't know, very easy to...
We'll get there.
Okay, sorry. Yes.
So, yeah, these are very similar descriptions. For instance, in the Lalita Upakhyana, what we see, it is very close to Vedantic realities. You give a lot of descriptions about it. It is this, it is that, it is bliss, it is divine, it is full of knowledge, it is powerful. All these things you say, finally, you end up saying you don't know what it is.
Yes.
So in itself, what it is, you are conceding that we don't know. The same applies to Deva. The same applies to the Upanishadic concept. Now, Upanishads are twofold, right? You have the Upanasana or the Upasana type Upanishads where the Atharva Sirsha or these things where you explain the nature of a Devata, Tattva, give a mantra and all that. There is then another set of Upanishads which are purely philosophical. You give this similar concepts, but you explain it more pedagogically. It's more explaining the concept rather than telling you the, putting it in a personified way, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
And then there is this compilation of Ganapati Muni called the Mahavidya Sutra, which he gave on the Dasha-Mahavidyas. There he traces the, so you also probably know that there are 32 Upanishadic Vidyas, right? The Chakshur Vidya is there, the Hara Vidya is there, Parovari is there. There are so many Vidyas in the Upanishad where, you meditate on I as the eternal, as the sun as the eternal, or the sky or the sound, the basic primal principles of the world. You meditate on them, and then eventually you transcend and you arrive at the ultimate reality. Now, these Vidyas, he correlates with the Dasha-Mahavidyas and says, basically, he maps that Vedic, then the Upanishadic, then the Tantric, and then there is a natural extension from it with the Grama Devatas and all these things that we can relate to. Let us say Renuka is there, Chinnamasta. So these he clearly maps. So basically, what I again keep referring to as the sheets, we find the same concepts across all the sheets of the traditions. In the folk, at the semi-formal, at the most formal, and the most orthodox levels. It's the same knowledge basically. It is made available in different forms to suit different types of practitioners for different lifestyles.
Okay.
So that continuity is extremely important. Once we make that out, then a lot of these artificial divisions that people make about Vedic, Tantric, all these kinds of dichotomies, they just dissolve in thin air. There is no such real distinction or anything. When, for instance, Arjuna practiced the Pashupata, he also was a Vedic, he conducted Vedic yajnas. He did, Bhimasena did, Yudhishthira did, they conducted a Rajasuya itself. But at the same time, they practiced the Pashupatas and all this. Are they Tantric or Vedic? There is no such distinction.
So Pashupata Vidya for the weapons.
Yes.
Okay. And that was a
Yes.
Okay. They're
Not
supposed to be
necessarily.
Tantric, is it?
You have both variants. You have Vaidika Astras also. You have. But once you get into the practice realm, it becomes more Tantric Agamic in any way. So that's the nature of their continuity. The more you get into that Upasana, all these Upasana Vidyas start, you get more exposure to them. Now, there is the other aspect is the worldview aspect, what we call as the Darshanas. The Darshana and the Deva are nearly orthogonal. The Deva is Deva. I mean, basically, the best compilation of Devatas you see in the Veda Samhita itself. There they explain the nature of the Devata in the form of the suktas, the mantras. And then we have a continuity. You have these agamas, tantras, where there is a lot more about the upasana of the Devata and the various vidyas of the Devata. So Mimamsa, most people would have heard of, right? There is a Purva Mimamsa, there is a Uttara Mimamsa. Between them, there is a conjoining called the Sankarsha Kanda, which is also called Devata Kanda, which gives you a nice continuity between the karma and the philosophy. This, the Sankarsha Kanda deals more with the Devata, the nature of the Devata, the Chandas and things like that. So how the concrete and the abstract are related, or how the action and the principle are related. This is the best joint or the link, if one would like to put it that way.
Give me an example of what do you mean by concrete and abstract are related, as described in the, you said.
Yeah, so the karma you
Shatakanda?
have, right? You have the yajna, you do the practices, the procedures are there, all these things are there. There, it's more like you learn this, you do this, the Devata will automatically be pleased, you will get the fruits. Okay. And all the qualities, good qualities that come with that Devata Upasana, that they will come. Then you have the Upanishadic reality, the Brahman is there, the Brahman is this, Brahman is that, this is how you reach Brahman, this is the nature of consciousness, all these things. Now, people tend to create a dichotomy between these two as the karma and jnana. But the Devata Kanda actually shows how they are not two different things, but they have a neat continuity. So here it also explains the nature of different chandas, where you use them, why you apply different chandas in your yajna. It is there also you find the the greatness of Gayatri, and then there are other stories in the other parts of Veda where they say that there are different chandas applied to get the soma. They go They try to go to the higher world, they fail, they come back. Then the three-legged Suparna in the form of the Gayatri in the form of Suparna, it goes and it actually gets the nectar. So it is successful in bringing down. So any ishti, you have to apply that chandas only. So this kind of philosophical reasoning is also given there. You call it philosophical or mythological, whatever you want to give. So it actually tells you, explains the relation between the action and the realization. They are not two different things. Action, as you do, it is bringing with it the realization anyway. The Devata or that bliss or whatever, that is the fruit of the action anyway, right? I mean, the once the yajna is conducted. So same applies to all kinds of yajna. You can do a japa yajna or the homa, archana, whatever you want. I mean, those practices are one side, but the philosophy of what a practice leads to, that is what we find here. And this is also where that is why it is called Devata Kanda.
In the Vedas, you're saying that the qualities of the Devatas are defined. So let's go to Sri Ramakrishna also, and I'm trying to build a connection here. So in some of the shlokas in the Vedas, I believe, and once again, I've heard from different people that, for example, a description of a Devi or even Saraswati would be actually with all human physical attributes, and it is almost and the beauty of the Devi would sort of come out.
Worldview or the Darshana aspect. So in the Sankhya, it is the Purusha-Prakriti dichotomy. According to Sankhya, you have those two primal principles from which everything comes. So the Darshana is basically what tells you the causation of the world, how the world came into existence, and what underlies it. And so you have several darshanas. There is a Mimamsa, there is a Vedanta, then you have the Sankhya, Yoga. Yoga is almost Sankhya, but then you have the Nyaya Vaiseshikas, then you have the Shankara Darshana, Ramanuja Darshana, and the Pashupata Darshana. There are countless darshanas. Pratyabhijna is there. So Darshana basically tells you this is how the world came into existence. Then you have those different causation theories. There is a Parinamavada or the Satkaryavada, which says that the universe is eternal. The seed principles are always existent. Then you have a Arambhavada that Nyaya Vaiseshikas subscribe, saying there is a definite point of creation and all that. And then you have one variant which says that which is basically Shankara Dvaita. It is a Vivartavada. It does not believe in the real transformation of it. It says all that is there is just is how things appear. You can't definitely say this is a real transformation or anything. Everything has its own context. In that context, it may appear real, but outside that frame, so he brings into picture these different frames of reality, the Vyavaharika, Paramarthika, and all that. And then each darshana tells you the relation between the individual, the cosmic, the world, the jiva or the individual, and the para, the eternal principle. And then what causes happiness and misery, and what is ultimately the way out for you into ultimate happiness. Because everybody craves happiness. Darshanas basically are about giving you happiness. Happiness is in two forms, Abhyudaya and Nishrayasa. I mean, this at a very high level is the... Now, in this, each darshana has a theory of causation and theory of what underlies the creation, what are the ultimate principles, and how we are related to them. Sankhya, as part of that, it says Purusha can be multiple, but they are all conscious beings. Prakriti is single. So that is how Dvaita comes actually. Dvaita derives more from Sankhya. Advaita puts this above and says all the diversity is all apparent. All this is the differences between beings, you see several beings because these are all separated by the layer called ego. Ultimately, at the essence, they may or may not be really multiple. So this, and then Prakriti and Purusha are they basically, again, the causation. They give this famous example. When a pot is made, there is a potter, then there is a clay. So there are two principles of causation, basically. The clay is the upadana karana, or the substance out of which your thing is coming. And then the maker is there, who is also the witness of what is happening. That often is attributed as the Purusha.
That sounds very similar to the Islamic idea of creation. There is a creator and he created something, the creation, but the creation is not part of the creator. Is that similar to what you're describing? Because there is a potter who's creating with the mud.
But the clay is also divine. Clay is the Prakriti.
The clay is the Prakriti, and then there is a witness outside of the Prakriti.
Both clay and potter are two divine primal principles. Both are divine.
Okay.
So what? Your origin is divine. So you are innately divine anyway. And what has created you as consciousness, it has pervaded you also, right? It's not as if you are separate from it. So what is realization in Sankhya? It is basically realizing that you are ultimately not nature, you are Purusha. So there is no difference. In the realized state, you are the Purusha, right? This is what is blasphemous in any Abrahamic thought.
Yes.
So, and so going further from this, then you have this Mimamsa, you have where the conception of universe is a grand yajna. All that is happening is twofold. Guna and karma happen always, all the time. Guna is the nature of, or the qualities that you have, and karma is what you keep doing knowingly or unknowingly. Once you have perfected on both these things, your ties with the nature can be torn down. Ultimately, it's the same realization and all that eventually follow. So understanding this world as a yajna is the karma mimamsa, and that is what you see in the Purusha Sukta in the Rig Veda. So you have this Devatas and this nature of the world, all these explained in the Veda, which is eternal, everybody agrees. And then you have these different darshanas which have different positions on the same thing. Shankara and Ramanuja have different positions on the same Purusha Sukta, on the same Gita, on the same Brahma Sutras, and on the same Upanishads. So they are interpreting these things, but all of them agree that these are eternal realities. So there is one essential nature of the world which can be seen through different windows. That is where these darshanas are coming in. So you don't have to understand Veda either in an Advaitic sense or a Dvaitic sense exactly. It can be anything. For an Upasaka, it doesn't really matter. For a philosopher, it matters. You can speculate this way or that way. This is more logical, that is more logical. For you to get your own moksha, all that is irrelevant. Ultimately, that reality will dawn on you and you will get your moksha either way, through any of the schools. So that is why a practitioner level, it doesn't matter at all. They don't bicker about all these things. This is mostly for the debates where the sampradaya to sampradaya, they present their views and they debate, they refute each other, they redefine their or reframe their formulations, all these things. That is a continuous process, but that is orthogonal to a real practitioners getting his own happiness. That is why you have so much of overlap. The same Devatas are worshipped by the Bauddhas, the Nastikas, the Vaidikas, Tantrikas. Everybody doesn't. There is so much of overlap at the practice level. The techniques are shared. The Devatas are shared.
Even the Nastikas, you said?
Yeah, Nastika is not the Charvakas, but from the Vedic Tantric pantheon perspective, the Bauddha Jaina become Nastika.
Okay.
Not exactly in the non-believer thing, right? It's basically the assertion that Veda is the axiomatic source of knowledge and belief in the Varna Ashrama Dharma. If you subscribe to these two, then that is an Astika Darshan.
Okay.
If you don't, it is an Astika.
The Astika or being Nastika is actually a centrality of the Vedas largely. Rather
Accepting
than
Veda as the Pramana and Varnashrama Dharma.
Oh wow.
Subscription to Varnashrama Dharma. So strangely, at the practice level, Buddhas also did not actually try to demolish Varna or anything, right? At the social reality, they had no problem. They did not take this as their philosophical premise. So that's also another thing we need to understand. It's not as if Buddha came to reform this social institution or anything. He did not do anything like that. But at their philosophical premise, they don't take this as a common denominator or their axiomatic knowledge. Now, going back, this slightly different from this Prakriti-Purusha is the Shiva-Shakti duality. It is related, but not exactly the same. Now, these two are always united, Shiva and Shakti. They are the two complementary principles that are running the world in. Now, you get down to Shaiva Shakta, you have this they are interpreted in various ways. They are called Prakasha and Vimarsha, the enlightenment and the discrimination. Vimarsha is also, Vimarsha is a word for mirror. Basically, it's like he's seeing himself in that mirror. So, his image of himself in her is the world, basically.
Wow, beautiful.
So, this is how the Shaiva Darshana puts it. So, yeah, each of these is a very beautiful way of putting things, understanding the ultimate reality. And the continuity aspect again is interesting. From there, this you get this complementarity, principle of complementarity. Two principles are there; they are always in an interplay. One makes up for the other, and one is inseparable from the other. And then you see the similar principles in the Veda. You see the similar principles in your family life. You have a head and center of the family, the male and female principles. They are inseparable. Are they the same? Exactly from one perspective, they are the same. At one level and at an operational level, you see from the below at an action to action level, they seem very different. But head and center are not really separable. They are complementary. One doesn't exist without the other. On occasions, you see the same entity performing both the roles. Not many relate to this, but if you see the role of Indra and Agni in the Veda, in the Samhita, probably it amounts to the same. One is, about mastery, and the other is about the sustenance, the divine will that from which everything else emanates and all that. You can see this in another way, the absolute nature of existence and the pervasiveness. The one that expands and spreads into the creation is one, and the essential principle is one. This is another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
The seed and the bija kshetra, how many ever ways, there are countless ways to say this.
Sure. Okay.
So the principles that we see in life, like complementarity or evolution, nature of evolution, all these things, these come from that worldview or the view of what we understand about the essence of the world or the nature of the world. And all of these qualities exist by principle of causation in what has caused the creation.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the theory of causation is important. We say that anything that is there in the effect has to be there in seed form or in manifest form in the cause. So all the qualities, good qualities that we see in the world are basically here because these qualities are there in the cause of this creation.
And the bad ones?
And the bad ones, no. Because there is nothing like bad. There is only what you know and what you don't know.
Yes, got it.
What is not known, so in an evolutionary stage, when good has not manifested, that is the stage of bad. Once the light comes, the darkness goes.
Yeah.
So that is where this vidya, avidya, all these things are there.
Very nice, yeah.
And there is an order to this world. That order is called dharma. The order by which all these things function, and evolution eventually happens by the same order. And devatas are those beings that always try to uphold that dharma. And they favor those beings that work in favor of dharma.
And so equally then, are there asuras who do not work in favor of dharma?
No. So asuras are not immortal for the same reason, because devatas are eternal. They go by dharma. They uphold dharma and they help people who abide by dharma. Asuras are not immortal. Asuras are beings like all other mortals. They have tried for their own abhyudaya, if you want to say, and they wanted to get superhuman powers or limits or whatever. They also had a huge caliber. As individuals grow, they do get, with their hard work, they do get a lot of success, a lot of power. Now, is this transcending into what human naturally should evolve into, or is it not? That is where the asura, non-asura distinction comes. So each asura, you see that ego eventually taking over, and the goals that the being has become unnatural or misaligned with the dharma. That is where they become asuric. In the essential sense, there is asura or rakshasa are also not negative, innately negative. In the Purana, you see more a dichotomy. Deva is positive, asura is negative. But even not exactly, right? You still have good ones like the Bali, those people who are not killed, Bali, Prahalad, all these people.
But why then, why do they have a connotation of asura attached to them at all?
That's what asura itself is not negative. In the creation, in the sequence of creation, asuras have the same source. They also come from the Prajapati.
So Devatas and asuras both come from Prajapati.
Yes.
Which is Brahman, which is Brahma.
No, Prajapatis can be many. The father of Prajapatis is Brahma.
Brahma, okay.
So Prajapati is the father, right? Then the grandfather is Brahma. That is why he is called Pitamaha.
Okay.
Prapitamaha is the great grandfather. That is Vishnu.
Okay.
So that is one of the 1,000 names now of Vishnu.
Okay.
Prapitamaha. Anyway, so it's not as if the source of these is different from the divine. Asuras also come from the same source. Who is the father of Madhu and Kaitabha? They come from Vishnu only. But they have come from certain byproducts, discarded byproducts. So they eventually become negative. Then they have to go back to the same source anyway after.
And the route to going back to the same source is via human form?
Yes. I mean, human or asura, you call it human or non-human, that is, you can debate it, but
No, but going back to the same source, is it via the, so the reason I'm bringing this up is that I've also heard that Indra is not a permanent, I don't know how
Correct.
to call this, one
Yeah,
person or
that
one
portfolio
soul.
changes. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it keeps changing. So there are different, I don't know, is it souls or which keep taking different forms of
Yeah, Indra is a
Indra?
portfolio. It's a position.
Okay.
So you can Shatakratu, right? You can do those 100 yajnas and then become an Indra sometime in the future. Or you can become a Manu or whatever.
So you can also become a Manu.
Yeah. So that is what the Chandi Saptashati, that story is about him. No?
So human
Savarni.
beings can become
So the
Indra.
story is two people, two guys. One is that Samadhi, who is a trader. The other was a king. He eventually becomes a Manu in his subsequent lives.
Okay, so Manu is also a portfolio. It's not one person.
No, that is why they have a fixed duration, Manvantara.
Manu and Manvantara.
Swayambhu, Savarni, all these Manu. Each Manu has his Manvantara.
And Manvantara. So where does the Manu Smriti in this case fall?
It's basically, there will be a lot of controversy because there is too much of historic baggage associated with the Manusmriti. Assigning it to a human being and say that it has come at certain point in time. Now we follow it, we don't follow it, all these things. Okay. Manusmriti, what is its length in and applicability in time and space, all these things become very arguable. So that's why I'm not going there.
Yeah.
But yes, we are all Manavas, Manushyas, because we come from Manu.
Okay, but
all
Manu,
creation,
Manu
all
is
manifest
also
creation comes from Manus.
But Manus also is a non-human beings.
Yes, they are so in the sequence of creation, right? And then you have the Hiranyagarbha, then you have the Prajapatis, then you have these Manus, then you have the Devatas, all these things.
Very interesting. So my conversation with Anand Prasad, so like I mentioned earlier in my PPT, that the episodes of Durga killing Mahishasura, for example, is an Asura. All of these magazines like Caravan bring it down to saying that Durga was an Aryan woman who was killing a Dalit, all this nonsense. So he's actually saying these are happening at a non-human level. They're happening a different realm. They are stories from there, and they're real. Real, not real is a different matter, but they're stories from there which humans are telling. Yeah. So you agree with that, right? Okay.
The rishis narrate this story, right? And then in that story, the Devatas speak, then they'll speak what they are doing to uphold the Dharma. Basically, slaying Asura is what? You are upholding Dharma, you are destroying Adharma.
So the battle of Dharma and Adharma continues at a non-human realm as well, at all levels.
Yes. So, okay, again, Earth is the plane of happening, where the most manifest results are visible. But this game has been played earlier in the higher world. And whatever we are seeing has already been played somewhere. We are just enacting it as an outcome of that play. Whatever is in our hands, that is why the Nimitta Matra word is there. We enact it, but it's not as if we have governed this play. Neither our life nor what is happening on there. Right? The Devatas play and then outcomes are on there. So if the Devatas are struggling to overcome Asuras, it is basically what's happening on the earth. As the result of it will be that Dharma is struggling on there. That is when you have these avatars coming in and upholding all that thing happens. Now, is it humanly you can interpret them or not? You can definitely interpret them. So there is a dichotomy. Dichotomy of what is Adarsha and what is a Leela. Divine works in these two forms. Let us say Rama has come down. He has lived an Adarsha. What he does, we can literally follow and say that I follow him, this is an Adarsha, I can live by that blindly. Then there is a Leela, what Krishna did in the Rasa and all. That is why it is called a Leela. That is not a model for emulation. And he is pretty clearly saying it, that it is not a model for emulation. So there is simply no scope for confusion in the Purana, what is to be followed, what is not to be followed.
Beautiful.
And this is where a lot of controversy is created. That's why I'm trying to. Can you also do like Krishna, all these things? It has been pretty clearly said what can be and what cannot be. Where Krishna lived like a human, he had worshipped the learned ones, he worshipped the cows, he respected the kings and learned ones. He maintained his diplomatic discourse even when he talked to the Asuras. So all that is human conduct, an Adarsha that has to be followed. And Krishna lived that Adarsha perfectly, just as perfectly as Rama. He did not cut any corners anywhere. And then there is a Adarsha, non-Adarsha realm, the Leela realm, where anyway all this trying to learn all this is not there. This is basically we, in our own process of transcendence, try to understand this and seek out the divine. Now, okay, we were probably on the duality and all that, the Shakti Shiva principle from there. Then the next point you had, or the next slide probably was around the Devata. Is it a world or thing? Right? And how do you see the world inside a Devata? That was your point. Right?
Then the Mahadasha-Vidyas of Sattvic, Tamasic. I recently learned about this, that there are actually Tamasic, I don't know, Devis, if you like. Matangi, for example, I learned among the Dasha-Mahavidyas. Now that surprises me completely. Why would we call it Tamasic? Tamasic is actually inertia. It is taken as a negative quality in human beings. Vivekananda Swami kept saying, for example, Tamasic Pravritti, it's always regarded as negative.
All the three are there in the world. And people are also of all the three types. Humans. This actually, we also need to connect to the concept of Varna. Varna is there in the universe at the macro level. Devatas have Varna, flowers have Varna, grahas have Varna, everything have Varna. It's basically how you look at the world. It's not as if that is the innate nature. If that is there in the Prakriti, your source, it has to be there in every of its manifestation also. Every being will have these qualities. There is no way they are not going to have these qualities. Now, once you have acknowledged that they have these qualities, you need to deal with it. You can't ignore it. So, to understand these three qualities, and then to ensure that the paths we are laying down suit all these people of all these three qualities in their own evolution. Moksha is there for everybody, every being, human or otherwise, tamasic or sattvic. Everybody has a way to moksha. And you can provide it only when you understand what their nature is. So the ruchi, adhikara, all these things are there, no? Based on the swabhava of each being. You need to be able to cater to each of these. That is when your philosophies or practices are universal. Otherwise, we cannot cater to the whole society or the whole of creation. Mankind to be specific, but not exactly even limited to mankind. When the rishis saw the universe in a certain way, their scheme of Abhyudaya or Nishrayasa was not limited to just one section of humanity or even humanity itself. They understood that this is all a continuous evolution from a snail to Brahma, or from a Brahma Kita Paryantam, right? So from ant to Brahma, every being basically is following the same journey towards the divine. In evolution, they are at different stages. So this binding and liberation are applicable to each of these. And one could actually get that ultimate liberation from the cycle of birth and death in any form.
Oh, I thought it was only at the human form level. That is why the human form is so sort of elevated or talked about.
Human is most enabled in that journey. So it is most likely.
Isn't it true that the Devatas have to take human form to evolve?
Human is the most enabled form where you can bring the major transformation. But let us say you have brought most of the transformation where you are very close to breaking the cycle. Your karma nivritti is nearly done. There is an ounce left. For that ounce, you may not necessarily need to have taken a human birth. It could be in any form. That reminder, if it is just a matter of paying that reminder, there is no further evolution you would have required. That could have happened even without you realizing that it is happening. Right? I mean, when somebody does a serious sadhana, a lot of karma kshaya happens, the destruction of old things happen without even your knowledge. So there is no determinism in that you have to take this form and do only this thing. And in continuation, it is obviously also not going to be limited to a certain section of humans with certain qualities. They are definitely better enabled than other humans, just like humans are better enabled than non-humans.
Okay.
So in continuity, yes, you have the Devatas, you have the Manus, you have the Vyasa, and then you have a range of other beings. There are Valakilya Rishis, there are various, beings that we don't even hear the names of.
So Vyasa, sorry, once again, it's not one person, one Rishi, Vyasa.
Vyasa has bigger lifetime than the Devatas.
So what is the Vyasa story? That he was born, grew up himself, born as a child, then within just a little time.
There is a human context. There is a human context to everything. There is a human context to avatars and devatas also.
What do you mean?
Krishna Dvaipayana is a Vyasa, which has done that job at this time. Vyasa portfolio is not limited to that. And there is a bigger cycle where the Devatas operate. Then there is a bigger cycle where the Prajapatis operate. Then there are bigger cycles where the Hiranyagarbhas operate.
And they have their own days and they have their own battles of
time-space parameters. Yes.
So that is why one Brahma day becomes, I don't know how
you
many
have different,
hundreds of thousands.
They are all different worlds, and each world has its own time-space parameters, its own nature of visible day and night, all these things. Exactly, the Brahma day, and then you have the divine day, which is 1 year here. So the night is through our second part of the Dakshinayana, then you have their day in our Uttarayana, all these things.
This also I read recently that the Uttarayana and the Dakshinayana are actually a day and night cycles in another
divine day, yes.
Which is in the realm of Devas.
So understanding the world and understanding Devata are not very different. If you have understood the Devata, it's basically like that. That's why I kept this for the later portion. Is apart from the Sankarsha Kanda and the Samhitas and the Agamas, the one thing we need to really, a quick way to understand all this is the Dhyana Shlokas of Devatas. Let us say Bhuvaneshwari, as you took that example.
You took that example. It was in your Anand's video.
So 4 hands sitting in a Padmasana, and then the radiance, the color of her radiance is like dawn. 4 hands, 2 with the Varada and Abhaya, 2 hands holding that Pasha and Ankusha, which basically Ayudhas are very important. Then once the Ayudhas are there, the hands, legs, all these things, then the heads, and then the color of their radiance, all these are very important. These throw light into the yogic aspects. And then the Bijaksharas are there. They tell the nature of that being. And beyond all this is the ultimate existence of that Devata, which is not exactly that personified form anymore, once you have transcended all these things. So as the sadhana progresses, as you understand more and more subtler aspects of the Devata, your mind expands into understanding the subtler aspects. Naturally, you will understand that it's no more one personified being or anything. Yes, that personified being stage is definitely there. But the same eternal existent principle, whatever you call it, has descended through all these worlds in various forms. So if you want to give an example from engineering, right, the computer world, the best example probably would be your network stack. It is the same data, consciousness. At each layer, for it to be decipherable, you put a frame to it, one packet head or something. Within that frame, it is understandable. So at the intelligence principle, it makes sense in certain way, probably the most abstract way. Then you have the level of mind where the bhavanatmaka, and then the spandanatmaka in the vital world, it's basically through the resonance or the vibration that you make sense of things. So the way the senses operate, the eyes, ears, all these things. So at the world of senses, it is the spandanatmaka, the mind, you have this as a bhavanatmaka, the sense of feel. But it is the same consciousness. What you are experiencing through the eyes is the same thing you are experiencing with your intellect and your mind, everything. It's the same consciousness that has descended through all these layers. But experience, you as a being, you are experiencing through different faculties in different ways. Not because that essential thing is different, but owing to the difference of these upadhis or the vessels into which that is descending. So just like in your network stack, you have a data link layer where you have a frame. Within that frame, you can understand this is the data. I don't understand what is inside it, that is bytes coming, but I understand this data link frame. Then you have a network frame. You understand that. You don't understand what is above that. You don't understand what is the TCP data. You understand only what is the IP data. So how your senses are equipped, how your mind is equipped, how your intellect is equipped, based on how you are evolving from within, you are able to make sense of the same thing in a different way. So the same word starts appearing very differently to you. Same life starts making very different sense to you if you are a mind being instead of being a sense being.
Personified being, say Kali, and in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, in his journey of course, he probably had visions much earlier as a young boy of 10 or 12 when he saw cranes flying over his head and got into a trance, and then he discovers Kali and sort of starts relating to her as the mother and the creator of this whole universe, and then starts to see Kali. What you're actually saying is that he goes beyond the personified being or stays with her. Even if he stays with that personified being, it probably, the difference is, there is no difference anymore. Or is it that, or you're saying that he's actually going beyond the personified being?
That is where the magic is. That is why those words, those shlokas or the mantras or the rupa descriptions, they are magical because those words are exactly applicable at all the realms. When you see it as a personified being, the same description applies. when you see it at the eternal level, the same exact terminology applies, but it makes a very different sense to you at that level. So you put it in a, let us say you have transcended all these levels, say the same description exactly applies there also. Ultimately, the same Bhuvaneshwari is eternal. When all these lower forms don't apply, let us say the same, these two weapons are there and the Varda Abhaya are there. For a practitioner, it is basically you pray to her, you will be free of all fears, you will get whatever you want. But the same, and then the Pasha and Ankusha, basically you can overcome your limitations like anger and desire, or whatever are happening with these things, you will be put out of those limitations, so that your suffering is gone. Right? This is one level of description.
Are they simply bijam? Are they simply mantras, which are a personification of different attributes of the same Devi? Or does the Devi exist as different rupas, one which will get you rid of fear? For example,
it will, that's what I am saying.
Mahasaraswati, it seems as Matangi. It's a tantric form of Saraswati, is what I recently learned during the recent Navratri, Chaitra Navratri.
Yes, she is Mantrini, so the knowledge. And then you have so many Vidyas, Sangita, Matangi, all these things. Then there is Laghu Shyamala, then Matta Matangi, all this.
Okay,
but
so at the level of the Devatas,
these forms are real. They will be relatable in the Taijasic world, in the world of illumination, or the world where the thought forms are there, illuminated thought forms are there, not the physical beings. There you can see them as beings. But above that world, beyond the Tejas, when you get into these still higher worlds, they are not these personified forms anymore, but the same exact description applies there also. If you have properly understood with your sadhana, once you have transcended from all those four levels of work, right? The Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. Once you have transcended the Pashyanti layer also into Para layer, the same exact description will apply in a very different way. It becomes Parabrahman. All the description you see in a Sahasranama or a Dhyana Shloka applies exactly to Parabrahman as much as it applies in the lower layer. Is it the Devata that is transcending? No. You are transcending, so you are seeing the Devata in a different way, in a more subtle way. So ultimately, Devata does exist and does not exist. The same rishis who have said that this is all absolute, the Brahman, they have also created these schemes of Devatas, right? You have the Dikpalakas, Graha Devatas, you have the Lokapalakas, then you have the Vishwa Devatas. So many groups have been created. Why? They also know that it is the same thing. It is the same people who said all these the same, who have created these distinctions also. Because these schemes actually are what apply to your life to elevate your life. So Devatas actually, I think in the Murti Puja also I said the same thing. Divine is ultimately divine. It doesn't need to assume any qualities. It has assumed so many forms for the sake of the sadhaka, to elevate him. So it can take any form based on your nature. If you are a sattvic being, it will take a pleasant form, or it can take a fierce form. It will take countless forms from time to time, from space to space. New forms will also come.
That depends on the condition of the humans in that era. I don't even know what an era would mean here then. So what is an era when a Durga is being created by the Devatas?
These are eternal stories. That Kshirasagara Madhana or the Shumbhavadha or whatever, Mahishamavadha, all that can happen at all times, at all places. In your own life, it would have happened for you when you evolve. So it's an eternal story. Did it happen once in history? Not exactly. It's not a historic fact. It would have happened in many forms countless forms so far. Did it happen? Oh yeah, so many countless times. So is it real? Yeah, it has been real. But are you mapping it to one queen and king and one war in history in a chronological sense? It doesn't make any sense. It may have been, but it doesn't matter. Because even let us say a historic Krishna existed. What do you have to do with him anyway? What you have to do with is the Vasudeva that is eternal. Before the Krishna came and after the Krishna came. Even before Krishna came, there was Krishna mantra, and again, so many Mahayugas, so many Vasudevas would have come, or in so many forms they would have descended. And then each of them would have given rise to a different set of mantras, upasana vidyas. They would have set a different example at different times. So, I mean, we are too limited to make a conclusive statement about what the divine forms would be in the vast time and space. Right? So many rounds of creations would have happened. So many places are there in the infinite universe where creation would have happened in so many cycles. What exactly does human know here that he can make a call on all that? So that is exactly what you see in the Puranic stories. Finally, the Brahma or these Trimurtis go and they will discover a higher form like Parashakti or Sadashiva or Mahavishnu, who is actually creating these Trimurtis and appointing them, saying, you are creating these worlds and dissolving. This is your limited space in time. But so many such Trimurti combinations I would have created by now, you don't even know their count. And that transcendental form is what they call, in the Devi Bhagavata, it is the Parashakti, whatever. So basically, and again, each Devata, Vishnu can be the same thing, Shiva can be the same thing. So whatever we relate to in what we have seen, we can attribute to that the ultimate principle. And then finally, these Trimurtis say that we give up, we can't even understand. Can anybody conclusively say this is exactly the nature of reality? Impossible. But what we are really concerned about is our life, how we get happiness, how do we live a meaningful and purposeful life, how do we make life happy instead of miserable. For that, all the sadhana margas are there. So yeah, actually going back to your question, time and space, do specific forms come from time to time? They are the avatars. Going by the nature of what is happening on the earth right now, if certain form is required, the divine will come in that form. The avatara or avadhuta are based on what is the requirement at that time. That is called divine will, right? By divine will, the divine designs for certain purposes that the divine self intends. And there you have all these elevated men like the rishis. They can see that, they understand it. Some of them are appointed to serve certain cause, saying, I will come down. Now you will go there and you will appear to me and you will give me that. So you all become the means to fulfill my purpose. So all this game would have been played already in the divine world. And people with certain tapas can see that. So that is what we see in Mahabharata, right? I mean, when Draupadi's story comes, then Narada, Vyasa, all these people explain. See, this has already been played out. This is an outcome. So these 5 Indras, all those stories are told to her. There are 5 Indras, they have done this, they had this curse. So now the Shri will come down on earth and she will marry 5 Indras, all that thing. And then there is a human context for her in the previous life, she would have done tapas, all that. So yeah, point is, there is a causation. And causation is understood by people who have invested in the knowledge of that causation. So we don't think that the happenings are random. And we get a better understanding of what is exactly happening now. Though we think it is wrong, we will understand that it is happening exactly, perfectly, according to a more systematic scheme if we have transcended and understood that. And we cannot definitely understand as individuals the whole scheme of the whole world. The best we can do is we understand our own causation. Say that my life is like this because of this.
Yeah.
That is what the sadhana they recommend, right? Say who you are, meditate on that, all these things.
Simply the Varna could actually become another big topic, and the Gunas and the Varna Ashram operating at the universal level. My God, first time I've heard this. Now, all this business of Shudra, all this narrative just collapses completely in context of that. I could be anybody. I could be I don't know what, how, maybe outside the Varnashram, somebody like an untouchable, but it's only in my journey right now towards evolution, which also maybe I chose this experience at this point in time. And maybe in another life, I may choose another experience of a different Varna, somebody else in a different Varnashram. So we'll maybe touch upon this as in one of the next topics to discuss.
Sure. So what I would say as a continuity of this is, once we have mapped these worlds, those 7 worlds are there now, where the world of the physical, vital, the mental, then you have the Vijnana, and then you have the Sachidananda, all these layers. This is our worldview. And we say human transcends, or every being transcends through these. How the Abrahamics actually see the world. That is where your source is there. Your source is bliss. Their source is sin. So that's the point you are initially saying, right? That, but Papa Bhiti we have. We have Daiva Bhakti and Papa Bhiti. We are fearful of bad conduct, and we are devoted to the divine. We are not God-fearing. Abrahamics are God-fearing. That is the main difference.
We did a talk recently on this.
So okay.
Very interesting.
As a way to position these, two diverse philosophies, and then make a contrast and relate them to the lived reality. And then our policies and all these things can come out.
Yes, of the Dharma Rajya. Very good. Thank you very much, Shankar.